I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again for JoBlo.com with another Best Movie You Never Saw video edition, and this week we're taking a look at Joel Schumacher's controversial Falling Down, starring Michael Douglas as a laid-off white-collar worker who makes a violent trek home across 1990s LA in the midst of a heat wave, co-starring Robert Duvall and Barbara Hershey. Now, in the early 90s, Michael Douglas was riding high off the unexpected massive success of Basic Instinct. Tempted to take a break from acting, having made that and Shining Through back-to-back, Douglas was lured into making Falling Down by his friend Joel Schumacher. A huge change of pace for both of them, in particular Schumacher, who was then known mostly for sexy commercial fare like St. Elmo's Fire, The Lost Boys, and Flatliners. Falling Down was a risky bet for Warner Brothers. Douglas was so keen to make this film after reading Abby Rose Smith's script that he lowered his substantial fee for the time to get the film made. And you have to remember, Michael Douglas at this time was one of the top box office attractions in the world. And the result was a relatively acclaimed film that did respectably well at the box office, grossing $40.9 million against a $25 million budget. Although, absolutely shockingly, Michael Douglas and the film was totally shut out of the awards race at the end of the year. Politically, though, it became something of a hot potato, with some missing the message of the movie and accusing it of being racist or fascist, and to this date, it's still a movie that makes people uncomfortable. Now, Falling Down is most definitely a movie that takes on an interesting new dimension when watched nowadays, 26 years after its release. Having been shot in the midst of much turmoil in LA, with the shooting actually being interrupted by the Rodney King riots, it's shown a light on a thoroughly unpleasant character, the angry, toxic, disenfranchised, or so he thinks, white male, Defense. That's the nickname of the Michael Douglas character. It's telling that some watch this movie thinking Douglas is a kind of vigilante icon in the mold of Charles Bronson in Death Wish, but that's not the case at all. He's a lunatic, and while the film cleverly attempts to get us to sympathize with him at times or even cheer him on, that's the point. He's crazy. In some ways, it's a lot like Todd Phillips' recent Joker movie. They, in some ways, are doing the same thing. Now, this kind of went over people's heads back in 1993, and I think it's also going over people's heads now. But one person whose head it didn't go over was Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas's father, who actually wrote an LA Times editorial about the film after his son was absolutely attacked in the press by making this unpalatable character somehow a hero. As Kirk Douglas wrote, he played it brilliantly, and I think it's his best piece of work to date. Michael's character is not the quote-unquote hero or quote-unquote newest urban icon. He's the villain and the victim. Now, this is something that people have a hard time getting, but that's kind of the point. I think the writer, Abby Rose Smith, in a look back at the film 20 years after it was made, said it pretty well when he said, I would say, take a look. This guy is sick. He has real issues. He's not really taking a heroic stand, although I think there are two things going on in this movie. One is how messed up he was, and the other part of it is that he was doing things that made people feel good. There were things that people wanted to do themselves but couldn't do because of the risk and putting themselves out there in this dangerous place.
I'm not economically viable.
Now, that's a pretty controversial thing for the writer of the film to say, and I think this is one of the reasons why people reacted so strongly to the film back in 1993, and I think that's why people still react strongly to the film to this day. Now, Joel Schumacher, who's an interesting director who never really got his due, does something crazy. He makes the audience complicit in Defense's crimes, and it's a dazzling directorial outing for a filmmaker who's often been mocked for his camp style. I mean, let's not forget, this is the same guy who put nipples on the Batsuit. Also directing one of the best urban thrillers of the 1990s? Unbelievable, right? Well, that's Joel Schumacher. I mean, the guy is pretty great. One of the most telling moments in this film occurs at the midway point, when Douglas's Bill Foster, that's the real name of the guy that we all call Defense, comes face to face with Frederick Forrest's Nazi military surplus store owner. And you can tell by the look on Douglas's face throughout that he despises the man, grimacing at his homophobic comments towards a gay couple.
I think they're all pussies and
Yet, the thing is, he's really not that different from this Nazi psycho at all. He only thinks he is. It's interesting that Forrest becomes the first person he actually murders in the film. sending him past the point of no return and kicking up his violent trek home to his ex-wife, played by Barbara Hershey, and child a few notches. It's hard not to agree with Robert Duvall's sympathetic cop character, who knows damn well this guy is going to wind up killing both his wife and his daughter unless he does something about it. In fact, Foster or Defense's Odyssey has many uncomfortable parallels to many cases that have cropped up in headlines years later. It's also hard to separate this film from the current political climate. I mean, just look at all the controversy surrounding the Joker film. People are talking about incels, people are talking about the alt-right. If you look at Falling Down, all these themes are in the film, and nobody could have ever predicted how Falling Down, which was once a kind of out-there thriller, would seem at this point a dangerous, provocative film. There's something very familiar about Defense's gripes with society. Now, if you read a lot of editorials that are being put out there, is that when this movie came out, Defense was an outlier. In the years since, Defense has gone mainstream, and I think that's a terrifying thought. Now, politics and weightier themes aside, you have to acknowledge that Falling Down is still a terrifically entertaining movie, and I tend to agree with Kirk Douglas when he said that it's Michael Douglas' best performance ever. Even Gordon Gekko was kinda cool in that familiar Michael Douglas kind of way with the slick back hair and he's slick. Here he utterly vanishes into Defense, and the fact that he wasn't even nominated for an Oscar is absolutely criminal. As the kindly cop chasing him, Robert Duvall is remarkably empathetic, perhaps more empathetic than he's ever been outside of maybe Tender Mercies, and they gave him enough material to chew on that it's surprising that he wasn't also nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
I want to know when the hell you're coming home now!
Amanda, shut up. Did you hear me? Shut up. Now, I'll get home when I'm finished, and not 1 second before. Now, is that clear? Is that clear?
Now, the cop on the verge of retirement is of course a bit of a cliche, as is the fact that they're sending him into danger on his last day at work, but just Duvall is so damn good in this movie that he makes it work. And I also liked his disturbed wife at home, played by Tuesday Weld, who was this absolute sex symbol in the 1960s, who's doing kind of an interesting deconstruction of her own status. Now, if we're talking about best scenes in Falling Down, I think the one that everybody always thinks about is the part where Michael Douglas goes into a fast food restaurant that's kind of a thinly veiled version of McDonald's. Now, my first job ever was working at McDonald's, and let me tell you, people got pissed when they arrived a few minutes late for breakfast. People just loved their Egg McMuffins. Now they serve them pretty much 24 hours a day, but back then, if you came past 11, if you came at 11:01, you would not be able to get a McMuffin, and people went crazy, and they had meltdowns. And as crazy as Defense gets in this scene where he has a meltdown, people were cheering for it back in theaters in 1993 because damn it, they wanted their McMuffins and they were pissed off that they couldn't get them, and this was wish fulfillment.
I don't want lunch. I want breakfast.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm really sorry too.
Now, Falling Down, as uncomfortable as it is at times, is a movie that I think demands to be watched and maybe rewatched. If you haven't seen it in a long time, it's definitely primed for a revisit. Now, you can find it pretty easily on iTunes, Google Play, Blu-ray, and in fact it's streaming on Starz in Canada in a nice HD version. I would say it's probably a toss-up between this and The Lost Boys as far as my favorite Joel Schumacher films go, and for anybody who dismisses him based on his Batman movies, I'd say give this a watch. Those movies, well, yes, kind of dated, even if they were fun in a campy kind of way, well at least the first one was, Batman Forever, they really don't define him as a director. This is the movie, I think, that defines Joel Schumacher, and it's a damn good film and an utterly fascinating one to re-examine through a contemporary lens, especially with Joker coming out this week. If you haven't seen it in a while, definitely worth a revisit and check it out. Until next time, I'm Chris Bumbray for JoBlo.com.